So welcome to an urgent conversation about the future of singers in a pandemic. The music leaders will discuss their concerns and current strategies. Our virologist and our public health specialist will explain how COVID-19 directly impacts choirs and singers. They will provide terminology needed to navigate this conversation. So go grab your paper and your pen. I've had several conversations with colleagues and with my choir directors locally about what are we going to do next? What are we doing? And some people don't even know. They've not even thought about like what is possible. So I thought this conversation necessary to discuss the possibilities. So we have people here from academia as well as the church. And so I think our dynamics are great, and we need to come to some kind of conversation that leads us to making great decisions. The CDC recently released their findings concerning the church, I believe it was in Washington State, where they'd had 2 choir rehearsals. And from those choir rehearsals, 53 people were hospitalized and 2 of them died. I'll say that again, 53 were hospitalized and 2 died. The Washington Post just last week released an article that said for 1 minute of aerosol emission, you're speaking, the aerosol emission can last for 8 minutes or longer. There are many articles that I've read, and all of them call for great pause for concern. I am concerned. With churches preparing to open and colleges and universities uncertain about the fall semester, it is my hope that this conversation will encourage more dialogue between music leaders and provide information needed to make well-informed decisions. So let's get started. I am Valerie Johnson. I am a church choir director. I am a professional singer. I am a college voice professor in particular. And I am extremely concerned about the future of choirs and singers. Like me, our panelists are faced with similar challenges. Our gifting has been impacted and our livelihood interrupted. So we're going to take a moment to hear from them. I'd like our music leaders first to share with us a little bit about themselves and what they do. And then I want you to answer this question. How are you currently addressing the impact of COVID-19? Let's start with Dr. Garrett, a longtime friend, colleague, and a mentor. I actually call her the queen mother of choirs because she has trained so many wonderful directors and she's been a mentor to many. So Dr. Garrett, please share with us a little bit about yourself and then answer this important question.
Okay, my career was spent as a high school music teacher at Eastern High School in Washington, D.C., where I had privilege to work 2 years with Patrick Lundy, who succeeded me. He's on the panel tonight. After that, currently I serve as the Music and Worship Arts Director at Alfred Street Baptist Church, a large church in Alexandria, Virginia, with a large music and worship arts ministry. And you want me to tell you now what we're doing?
Yes. What are you doing currently?
No large choir gatherings, only small praise teams are recording. We're doing virtual choirs. We're trying to do one at least every 2 or 3 weeks. Children are preparing one now. Then we're going to do one with all men for Men's Day. People really like that. And I use the choirs. I don't use any one choir and then another choir. There are people from all the different choirs that come for each virtual choir. That's to keep everybody engaged. So the biggest thing for me now is to just keep people engaged. They're having a lot of virtual Zoom meetings. We are still in contact with our choir members. One choir director called all of his members. So I send my members music links of that I want them to listen to, maybe other sacred music or classical music that I like. I just, every so often, I just want to keep them engaged, because when this is over, we still want to have a choir. So that's our challenge to me. How do we keep the people engaged for, it could be up to a year.
Right, right.
Absolutely.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us. Dr. Patrick Lundy, my Howard University friend and choir member. Patrick, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing, and how this is impacting both your jobs.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Valerie, for inviting me to be a part of this esteemed panel, actually. So I am currently a recording artist. Many know that I've started a community choir 25 years ago called the Ministers of Music. But I'm also the worship arts director at Reed Temple AME Church in Lanham, Maryland. And as Joy said, I succeeded her as a music teacher at Eastern High School. So currently we are, and I'm going to speak from the church's perspective. We're doing pretty much the same thing that Dr. Garrett said. We're doing a combination of virtual presentations as well as live recordings with very few singers. In fact, we are, for the most part, using a trio plus soloist and a smaller band to get our services together for the weekends. Recently, we used a few more singers because we were doing more classical anthems, hymns, and spirituals. But for the most part, we are trying to engage all of our worship arts ministries. Our dancers, even this weekend, are doing a virtual presentation. We are having meetings where the choir members are encouraged to talk about how they are doing, how they are making it out in this pandemic. So we're doing it as much as we can, as Dr. Garrett says, to keep our ministry engaged with the hope of coming back very strong.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, Dr. Carla Scott, my dear, dear friend, Carla, please share with us.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Carla Scott. I am currently on the faculty, adjunct faculty member at Eastern University, based in St. David, Pennsylvania, where I teach on the voice faculty and also teach some academic courses around leadership, particularly the past few semesters I've been teaching a class on art and social justice. My background is, of course, as a classically trained singer, and have had many wonderful opportunities to sing that way sort of around the country and in many other spots around the world. Have also quite a large past in church music as a worship leader, choir director, and choir director outside of church settings as well. I would say predominantly what's happening at the school where I'm teaching right now is a plan is really being put in place to sort of manage what's to come next semester. We know that a lot of the research is saying that exactly what Valerie indicated in the beginning. And so when you deal with an older building like ours with very small teaching spaces, many times your private lesson spaces are like the size of a practice room and the like. Given what's happening with the virus, this does not become a viable option. So I think we are looking very closely at the research and sort of figuring out if we will have, yet another digital semester. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Dr. Harlan Zachary, my longtime accompanist and friend.
Valerie, thank you for inviting me to be here this evening. I'm really humbled when I look at the names of the people on this panel. I'm humbled to be here, but thank you for the invitation. I, again, am Dr. Harlan Zachary. I am in my third year as Director of Choral Activities at Norfolk State University, where I direct the choirs, and I also teach music fundamentals and sight singing and ear training. And I'm also the Minister of Music at Crossroads United Methodist Church in Portsmouth, Virginia. Right now, we're on break. We're on summer break. And for the past couple of weeks, I have allowed the students to kind of rest and recuperate and gather themselves. Going on to online instruction right in the middle of the semester was a shock for everybody, of course. And I know it was particularly a shock for the students to all of a sudden try to handle all of their coursework and rehearsals and, well, recordings of rehearsals during that time. So I've just kind of left them alone right now to kind of recuperate and gather their thoughts. I have had a chat with our leadership team in the choir to kind of poll them and see where they are and find out how much of the virtual choir thing they're willing to do over the summer and possibly into the next school year. Our university right now has not made a determination that we will be online in the fall. They're deciding and meeting and considering what needs to be done for the fall. But right now, we're anticipating that we will be back all together on campus with precautions in place. For church, we have gone to Facebook Live on Sunday mornings. Right now, I go over to the sanctuary, I play and I sing. We have discussed bringing certain soloists in or maybe duets in, especially if they're related, if they're in the same home. We have several choristers in our congregation who do live in the same home, so it would be safe for them to come together to rehearse or sing on Sunday morning. But right now, everything is online, and we're making plans at the university for a full season next year, but we're also making contingency plans, looking at our choir room, the square footage, and how many people we can fit in there at a time safely, and reevaluating our whole building to see how we can hold classes. But right now, as I'm quite sure with everybody else, everything is up in the air. We're just waiting on a final decision from the university.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. Next, we're going to move to Kirsten Ingre Ham. Kirsten, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Valerie, for having me. My name is Kirsten Ingre Ham. I am here representing the National Society of Black Engineers. And it really is an awesome opportunity to be here to share with the members ways that they can stay safe during the pandemic, and some good hygiene practices to practice during the choir rehearsals and ways to stay safe and not to spread it to others.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So glad that you agreed to do this for us. And please forgive me for mispronouncing your name. Next, we have Dr. Johnson Thompson. Dr. Thompson, tell us a little bit about yourself. She's our virologist. I'm excited about this.
Yes, it's my pleasure to be here as well, and also to be among people who can do what I always tried to do, and that was to sing. And unfortunately, that was not my area. But I'm also pleased to be among a group of HBCU faculty. I was at the UDC as professor of biology for 25 years before coming here to RTP, where I ended my career at the National Institutes of Health. And for the past 10 years, I've been an adjunct professor at UNC Chapel Hill School of Public Health. My background, my training is in virology, and I did that for a while after leaving school, but then I moved into breast cancer research. So it's really a great opportunity to be back into the virology realm, and just getting back into that subject has been so exciting. So I'm very pleased to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So Dr. Johnson Thompson, we're going to start with you because I think you have a lot of the answers that we need to our questions. So if you will, go ahead and start sharing. Why should we even be concerned? Why are we concerned?
Okay, are you going to bring up my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So while you're doing that, I just want to tell you what I plan to do. I'm just going to talk about some of the characteristics of the virus that you should really be aware of as you contemplate how you're going forward. I will not talk about the disease, demographics, disease outcomes. I think Kirsten will talk about that. And so I don't want this to be very technical from my standpoint. I would be happy at some other times to really talk about the molecular biology of this virus, but that's not what I'm going to do tonight. So this first slide is really a nutshell of the characteristics that I'd like to present to you. And I'll spend more time on this slide. And after that, I'll show you some graphics which will really support this slide. So the first thing I want to tell you that is so important about the virus and important to you is that it is passed through airborne transmission. It's a very, very small virus, about 60 nanometers, NaNO meters. And to put that into perspective, it's 10 to the minus 9th meters in size. And if you look at that and try to compare it, let's say with the strand of hair, because we can see a strand of hair, it's about 40,000 times smaller than a strand of hair. And so it can only be visualized with the electron microscope. And as I said, it's highly infectious and it's community spread, which you already know. And this is done via respiratory fluids and airborne particles. And I'll talk a little bit more about airborne particles later. So the other thing that's important is that there is no experimentally, scientifically proven cure. It's not there. And this is not unusual because except for, I think, the flu virus, there's just no cure for viruses. And the reason why is because viruses use our cell machinery in order to replicate. So anything that you could use to stop this virus or kill it, you're also harming the cells. So there's no very limited selective mechanism. So when you want to look for a cure, you have to really find something that selectively inhibits the virus. And that's why remdesivir has shown some success, no curative success, but it has shown some success in reducing the time to recovery in some patients. And it does this by attacking the virus's RNA, which is the genome, the genetic material of the virus. So the best kind, the way you look at cures is what can specifically inhibit the virus. And we know about this in terms of bacteria, because bacterial, let me say antibiotics, selectively attack something that's unique to the bacteria. So for now, we have to depend on distancing ourselves, as well as using masks. And the other cliche that I'm really using more and more now is conventional wisdom. What is conventional wisdom? It's using what is known by other similar, in this case, viral agents. It's using those techniques or using those properties and trying to relate it to the unknown question that you have. Now, conventional wisdom, another word for it is, you can say common sense. So our mamas always told us that don't go near somebody who's coughing and sneezing. So we know that. And we really did need the scientists to tell us that part, right? So if we use conventional wisdom, we can propose some of the outcomes of this virus. And you will notice that there's so much information that's being passed along. And a lot of it, scientists and health professionals will say, we're not certain, we have to do the experiments. And this is the cautionary mechanisms that we as scientists use. But at the same time, we can extrapolate and provide information on what we already know. And that is a lot of what we are doing with this virus. Now, we do know that what we're going to do is or what we have to do is to implement testing, tracing, and also do quarantining. And this is what we've done with all the other viral diseases when we've had pandemics. I myself, I don't know if, well, I think I can suspect that at least one person is in my age group. And you will remember the standing in lines for the polio vaccine. You will also remember when we had measles, we had mumps. And so now we have vaccines for those diseases. But I clearly remember standing in line to get my polio vaccine. And at that time, we had a lot of evidence to see that it was necessary, because we saw children, crippled children in iron lung machines, just as we see so many with COVID suffering and dying. That's about conventional wisdom. So we need to fully implement testing, tracing, and quarantining. And that's all we have right now. However, we do have a lot of research going on, and the research has just exploded in this area. So there are trials in treatment, and you've heard of some of those. I mentioned remdesivir. And then there are also trials in prevention. There are numerous vaccine trials underway. And it looks as though that until we can identify a vaccine and introduce it to the community, at least 60 to 70% of the population would, and also depend on herd immunity, that we'll have to continue the social distancing and using the mask. And as I mentioned before, this is a novel virus. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. The disease syndrome is COVID-19. So the names aren't used interchangeably scientifically. One is the disease and the other is the name of the virus. And it's novel, it's new, and we continue to learn each day. So I'll go to my next slide. The next slide, if someone can. Okay. So this, I wanted to show it because it's what Professor Johnson just described in terms of the Washington State epidemiological study with that choir that practiced on 2 days. Actually, one day I believe was maybe March 3rd, and the next day was March 10th. And out of that choir group, 87% were infected by one lone person. And you can see that 32 confirmed cases and 20 probable cases. And of course, you can see the number of unaffected persons there in terms of the diagram. And so this also showed that COVID spread so easily. Now, it turns out when I read that study, on that second date, on the 10th, they actually spread out. The one person was sniffling, and they didn't say too much about where that person sat in the group, but the focus was that they were spread out. And of course, they didn't have face coverings. I have talked to my choir director at my church, and she has informed me that that is virtually impossible to do that. I will also tell you, I noticed, the rest of my colleagues here spoke about their choir experiences in terms of being a choir director. but I'm very active in my church, and we have not, and I've been in contact with my choir director, and she has not had any rehearsals. I will tell you that because I lived in Washington, D.C. for so long, I lived there 31 years, I was a member, and I still consider myself a member of St. Augustine Catholic Church. And so during this time, I've actually streamed into those masses. And each Sunday I was concerned because they had 3 vocalists singing every Sunday, and they would be separated 6 feet apart. But with my knowledge about how this virus can spread, I was really, really concerned. I didn't want to be panicky about it, but I finally contacted the priest there and told him of my concerns. And so for the last Sunday, they have been separated even further now. So I feel a little bit better, but I'm still not certain. Next slide, please. Okay, so I put this here, and I'm gonna read it. Blank is one of the most contagious of all infectious diseases. Up to 9 out of 10 susceptible persons with close contact to a patient will develop blank. The virus is transmitted by direct contact with infectious droplets or by airborne spread. When an infected person breathes, did you hear that? Breathes, coughs, or sneezes. Blank virus can remain infectious in the air for up to 2 hours after an infected person leaves an area. So my concern, and I just saw this particular slide 2 days ago. This is on the CD website. My concern as a virologist has always been that it's not just about coughs and sneezes. I was really concerned about breathing, and we're beginning to see more and more of that evidence. But this virus that they're talking about here is the measles virus. That's the measles virus. It's on the website now, and it's been there for a long time. So next slide, please. Okay, this slide, and I took these slides off the website, and I've given the credit at the bottom. So this slide shows what happens at time 0 when an aerosol is generated by person A. Person B receives a droplet spray and inhales. At this point, person C has no exposure. Now, infectivity is determined by the duration of exposure as well as the number of viral particles, and the duration. And those different colors and sizes really refer to these droplets. The droplets can be large or small. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that as the time increases, these droplets spread out. Now you can say the droplets are probably represent mucus or water that enclose the virus. But you should also be aware that some of the viruses will be spread individually. And then the next slide shows what happens at even increased times. You can see the particles that drop. These would be the heavier materials that engulf viruses. But then if the viruses have been aerolized, they go further, and C is impacted. The next slide, and I think this is my last slide. So this is another slide that really speculates about what could be happening with COVID. COVID-19 disease. And it's interesting that they show Ebola. Now, the issue with Ebola is huge. The virus that causes COVID-19 is about 60 nanometers, while Ebola is a filamentous virus, and it is 14,000 nanometers in length. And you can see how these heavy viruses will fall. I shouldn't say fall, but they will disperse more quickly. And the smaller viruses continue. And the example there is measles. And the question you see, well, is this characteristic of COVID-19 coronavirus? And it probably is, because conventional wisdom tells us that that virus is very small, and in fact, it's smaller than the measles virus. So with that, I'm going to end right now, but I'd be happy to answer questions either at the end or whenever Professor Johnson thinks it's more appropriate.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. That's a lot to take in. So panelists, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts after hearing that? What are you thinking? So let's start with Dr. Scott, Carla Scott. Tell me your thoughts. That's a lot to consider, especially being a voice professor and having students in your studio. Your students have to do recitals. So just kind of tell me what your thoughts are about this.
It absolutely is. And thank you so much, Dr. Thompson. Is very easy to understand, although we do not want to understand. Thank you so much. Not that we don't want to understand, it's very hard to hear, but thank you so much. And it is very consistent with the research. Let me just say, I'm an unashamed nerd. So I am someone who is always studying something and always trying to do the research and the behind the scenes on something. And this is even more in depth than what I've been able to pull up on my own and find. I guess one of the things that I also read is that if you're in a room that has a very high turnover rate of sort of fresh air coming in combination with a UV light apparatus that's able to maybe, I guess, lessen the effectiveness of the virus, that perhaps if a room is equipped with both of those things, you might have a chance of maybe even having a short live rehearsal. What are your thoughts on that? I apologize, I'm a nerd, but what are your thoughts there?
Yes, I have, I'm familiar with the airflow. In fact, I had even asked my choir director, I said, well, can you practice outside, where the air is flowing?
Right.
She said, I don't know, but I will tell you that the UV light is another situation. The UV light that will inactivate the viruses will also cause you problems. So you don't want to be under a UV light. In fact, in the lab, and in hospitals, UV light is used for sterilization, but it's only turned on when no one is in there. So what we do is we turn them on at night, and then the next day, we turn them off so we can work in there. So UV light to me is definitely not an option. I'm sorry.
Wow. I mean, we're here to learn. I mean, all of us are trying to figure it out, So Harlan, Dr. Zachary, HBCU choir conductor. Choir conductors have been struggling these last few months because their livelihood, normally in March and April, they're traveling and raising funds for the institution or serving as ambassadors for an institution. Tell me your thoughts given what you've just heard.
My first thought is a question. And that question is, if looking at the last slide, if somebody sneezes or coughs, that those particles will stay in the air up to 6 feet or more. But if someone is singing a fortissimo phrase for, let's say, across the span of 4 measures, how does that and they have the virus, do those particles stay in the air any longer than if someone coughs? And if so, then what is the suggested, or Dr. Johnson, your suggestion for how far apart our singers should be spaced in the confines of a rehearsal hall?
That's a good and a difficult question. First of all, I think you're going to be seeing more about breathing, okay? Because initially there was no emphasis on breathing, right? So you thought, oh, all I have to do is look out for people who are coughing or sneezing.
Right.
Now, conventional wisdom tells you also, how often are you around people who are coughing or sneezing? And the fact that so many people have come down with this virus, to me, suggests that breathing has played a big role. Where? In entertainment. In entertainment, you're at a concert, people are jumping around and singing with the singer, and sports events, even in health care facilities. So your question about people singing, when you're singing, from what I understand or what I have observed, let me say, when you're singing, you're really breathing more. And there's also the opportunity for you to release droplets. Because the virus is so small, to answer your specific question, it's going to move out even further than a droplet, because a droplet will go to the ground. Gravity will take it to the ground. So, and then if you're in a room, depending upon what the size of the room is, and everybody is singing, if you can just think about these infectious agents just traveling throughout that space. So I'm so sorry that I don't have a good suggestion, of how you do that.
Yeah. Well, we've got to keep talking about this so we can come to some kind, again, us trying to figure this out. Yeah. And I don't want to say that choirs will never come back, because I don't believe that, but I do believe we're on pause and we have to figure out another alternative. So Dr. Garrett, please share with us your thoughts, if you have any questions at this point about what's just been offered.
Her report was so insightful and sobering, but I've erred on the side of caution. I've kind of let our ministry know that it'll be a year. I'm just thinking a year or more before we can come back together in a choir setting. And the director said, oh, no, don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. But until we can feel safe, I don't see how we can do it any other way. And I'm going to do better about my praise teams, because they're standing sometimes closer than even 6 feet. I see them when they go to record. And what she's saying about the droplets, and the smaller they are, the further that. So I've got to do better about that. And I want everybody to see that presentation, because I think we are doing a lot of the wrong things. Everybody wants to get back to choir rehearsal so bad that we may be doing the wrong things.
Right.
Could be the president of the American Choir Directors Association sent an article out, and that article is saying 1, and some people say 1 to 2 years before choirs can gather, like we remember, and feel safe until there's a vaccine.
Yeah, the vaccine, and that's why I had that at the end. I put it in red so that it could be seen. We've got to get that vaccine, and it can be done. It can be done. We did it, and we do it each year for the flu virus, and it's very complicated. it is in no comparison to the simplicity of this virus. It's bigger. It has a larger genetic material that is in segments, and that's why, you know, we have to have a different a different vaccine each year, because the virus undergoes recombination, because those pieces of genetic material are separated. But this is not the same with SARS-CoV-2. It's a small genome, single-stranded. So we don't expect it to behave using conventional wisdom. We don't expect it to be like the flu virus, where you have to have a new virus. Usually there's a new virus, a new vaccine each season. But the other thing that I want to say is that if we can get that vaccine, one of the things that we really have going for us, see, I like the antibody test. I like the antibody test because if you can determine that people already have the disease, then maybe they can be separated out and go on, you know, if they're together. I mean, that's just something I've thought about. If you have the, and then what about if those people who are asymptomatic? We really got to figure out how many people are asymptomatic. Mm-hmm. Because if there were a way that we could really identify asymptomatic people, maybe we could have them practice together. That's just, you know, some off-the-wall ideas.
Valerie, could I ask a question?
Sure, absolutely.
Dr. Johnson Thompson, say a vaccine is ready in January. How does everybody get it? And how long will it take before, let's just take an average choir of 50 people in a regular church. How do we all get, is there a period that people have to make sure that the vaccine works before they'll take it? You know, a lot of people are very skeptical of vaccines. So how long?
That's the research that's going on now. And they've already gone through what we call the phase 1 trial, which looks at the safety of the vaccine. And now they're in phase 2. I think they're getting ready to go into phase 2. And that will determine the amount that's needed and for how long. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think it's going to be ready in January, okay? Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is. But your question is a good question. Once it is ready, it will be good. Okay, it will be good. So you don't have to worry about it. Once it's ready, it will be good. But then you have to, you know, make sure that everybody, well, a significant number of people are vaccinated.
Right.
And the number is usually 60 to 70% that you need. So that will take a while. That will take a good while. The nice thing that, well, it's good and bad news, is that they are already producing this substance that they think is going to work, right? So the good news is that when it's ready, we'll have the vaccine. But then what about if it's not good? Right. Then we have to start all over again. Mm-hmm. So those are the issues we're facing.
All right, thank you for sharing that. Dr. Lundy, please share your thoughts.
I mean, the information that was shared is just really eye-opening. It's kind of sobering. My question is, what about the mask? I mean, is that a possible solution for, say, 3 singers at the front alto tenor?
Oh, well, you should be able to tell me that. Can you sing effectively behind a mask? That would be my solution. But I will tell you this, and this is even more sobering. It will really depend upon what kind of mask you have. You know, people wearing, you know, surgical masks are not masks to prevent microorganisms from going through. Mm-hmm. They're really for surgeons to protect the surgeons against splashes of bodily fluids. And then the N95s, there are still some questions about that, because the N95 will prevent microorganisms. I'm sorry, I don't want to use the term because viruses are not living. Okay, so the N95 will prevent the passage of agents that are smaller than 100 nanometers. That's N90, and even with that, N95 means that it will prevent 95% of agents from passing. So you still have that 5% that could. But the most important thing is the size, the pore size. So this virus is about 60 nanometers. Okay. So it's a lot to deal with. Even, you know, people, you go out and you see people with the bandanas, I stay away as far as possible. If you have to use a bandana, I've been telling people, take a couple of coffee filters and put them under it. The bandana will provide some protection, but not a lot.
That's a lot to process, and I will share with you this. And one of the viewers also sent this comment. The National Association of Teachers of Singing had a conference several weeks ago, and one of their recommendations, I think from one of the epidemiologists, one of the doctors that was there, said that really 15 to 20 feet is what we should be doing.
I agree.
Going to do that.
I agree.
And that's a lot. That's a long way. I mean,
that's a long way.
The distance, you know. And then for the N95 mask, I mean, I have one, and when I go shopping, grocery shopping, I'm sweating by the time I get back home. And I'm like, oh, this is hot. So I can only imagine trying to sing with that. And then, you know, stuff, you know, being right there on you. I just don't know that's unanswered either. But thank you all for sharing that. I want to move on. Kirsten Ingre Ham, please share with us the best practices from your perspective as a church and choir member who is a public health professional.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Johnson. You know, as I was sitting here and listening to the conversation and thinking about it, and I feel safe in saying this, it's not that often I get to express my spirituality in conjunction with my work. But at the essence of who I am is I am a Christian. And the first thing that I sat back and I prayed and I said, God, what is it that you want to be conveyed in regards to the choirs? You know, I've been singing in choirs since I was a little girl. And you could just really see how the Spirit will flow through the sanctuary by the words of a song, or if someone is going through something, how it has a way of touching them. But the thing that has been staying in my mind is God has not given us the spirit of fear. And now is really the time as Christians, those that love to sing and to praise the Lord, to continue to support each other. The thing that I sit back and think about is the saying, am I my brother's keeper? And when I think about the mask, in that regard, yes. Because when you have the mask is not protecting you from receiving the virus. The mask is preventing you from spreading the virus to others. And so in that regard, you are wearing your mask, not to protect yourself, but to protect your brother and your sister. So in that regard, that's how you are your brother and your sister's keeper. As Dr. Johnson Thompson mentioned, you know, there's so much that's unknown about this. You know, there's so much, and, you know, you even have to look at ways to kind of distance yourself from turning on, you know, your CNNs and seeing what the counts are and seeing how many people are impacted, but still staying in the know and knowing what the guidelines are in your area so that you can be in compliance and keep your person safe, keep your household safe, and keep your choir members safe, right? So those are some of the things that I really sit back and think about One of the things that has come to light with COVID-19 is we all know health disparities and social determinants of health have been here. They've been here. We've been talking about this for a long time. COVID-19 had a way of ripping that mask right off. And there's no way you can say, I didn't know there was a health disparity. I didn't know there was an inequality, because it's showing us right here, right now, what that health disparity is, what that health inequality is. We're seeing for those that have certain health conditions, they are at a disproportionate disadvantage when it comes to COVID-19, right? Some of the things that researchers have found, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Johnson Thompson, is in regards to members that have lung disease. So that's your asthma. That's also lung cancer, COPD. You also, researchers have also found if you have heart conditions, that you're having not the best of outcomes. And, diabetes. And I would be remiss if I did not say, we say, I'm trying to think, I believe it's in Romans, where it says, present your body as a living sacrifice, right? And they're finding that if you have certain BMIs, that you're at a disproportionate rate. One of the things that I have been challenging my colleagues, my family members, my immediate community members, is to take this time while you're quarantining to get your body in the best shape it could be, right? You can't go back and change the past. I'll tell anybody, I love some good Southern cuisine. I really do. I do. I'm a Southern girl. But I got Southern girl tendencies all up on my hips and on my thighs. Right? It's the truth, right?
Yeah.
And you put it into perspective to say, if I'm consuming this, this may decrease, for lack of better words, decrease my chances to fight if I get COVID-19. What can I do to make my body as strong as possible? And going back and looking at some of the things that you may not normally do, but now you have the time. You can do different exercise tapes. They have different things that you can do on YouTube, with the choir members, you play a song and find ways to get moving and interact, so that you're keeping your body moving. But what are things that you can do to keep your body and your person healthy? There's also research that has found that it's very important to have good sleep, right? And I'll be the first to admit, sometimes I don't always get my 7 to 8 hours of sleep, right? But they're actually finding, again, it's having an impact on you if you're not getting good solid rest, right? And so at the end of the day, and I know I'm bringing up a lot of different Bible verses, but these are the things that I sit back and think about as a Christian that is also someone that is in public health, is when it comes to Ephesians, and it says, having done all you can do, stand, right? So in doing all that you can do to stand, what are things that you can personally do to strengthen your own personal body, to strengthen your family's personal body, and just be mindful of that. These are very uncertain and stressful times. And everyone is handling that stress very differently. And so finding ways to be each other's keeper, for lack of better words, to reach out and see how everyone is doing. Using the phone to call, keep in touch, using Zoom to interact so that you can have that social interaction, checking in with people to make sure, especially adults that may not be able to get out to get food and food security, right? We had food insecurity before COVID-19 happened. In many cases, you're hearing about it being exacerbated now with everything that has happened. And there's different resources that may be able to help in that regard. And I sit back and look at the disparity and how the disease is impacting one community over another community. This is just to put it into perspective. in North Carolina, according to the U.S. Census, African Americans make up 22%. Actually, it's 22.20% to be exact. And for the Latinx community, they make up 9.6% of the population. If you go and you look at the current caseload, the new cases that are here in North Carolina, and I'm going to pull up the information so it's as current as possible. So as of 2 p.m. today, this is information from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, and they updated their information today at 2 p.m. There are a total of 19,700 laboratory confirmed cases in North Carolina, which represents 691 deaths. We also have 585 members that are currently hospitalized. And now we have COVID-19 in all 100 counties in North Carolina. The disparity happens when you go and you look at, well, what is the ethnic and racial breakdown for those that have it? One of the things that's very important, and one of the things I love is I love data. But in loving data, you almost have to collect the data beforehand in order to be able to report it out. And so initially, not all of the information was reported in regards to race and ethnicity. There's about 5,000 cases where we do not have that data. But for 14,637 cases where we do have that information, where it was collected, we see that 32% of those cases are African American. Mind you, only 22% are reported as African American through the U.S. Census. And then if you look at the Latinx community, 32% of the cases are from someone who is Latinx, from the Latinx community.
Kirsten, excuse me, you're bringing us some really valid points, because the statistics that you are showing us really goes to show, when it comes to our community in terms of our church services, how it is such a massive impact, not just with the choirs, but the service itself and how we interact with one another. You shared an interesting story with me the other day about passing the offering plate. Talk to me a little bit more about being in the church service and the things that now we have to rethink about.
Definitely. That's a great point. You know, when you're in church, if the guidelines are, as Dr. Johnson Thompson had mentioned, to stay 6 feet, at least 6 feet away from the person sitting next to you, right? When you're passing the offering plate down the aisle, even if you pay your tithes online, the church that I go to, I pay my tithes online. That just helps me to keep track of everything, right? And they're passing the plate. Your arm length is not 6 feet. So that in and of itself, you're already no longer having that social distancing. If you think about the pews, the person sitting in front of you is not 6 feet away. And a person sitting behind you is not 6 feet away. You know, so thinking of creative ways to even worship in the same space are some of the things that need to be discussed and fleshed out.
Yeah, this again, you know, even with the statistics that that's kind of alarming, even with the disparages. And I think that we must hear more. We need to hear more on layman's terms. One of the conferences that I witnessed, it was so heavy laden with terminology that I wasn't able to understand it without using my dictionary. And there's some people that, you know, don't even have that advantage of talking with another music leader because they're the only one in their very small town. So the information that you all are providing us is very, very important. And I think that, again, we need to have another conversation where we can just come up with better ways of moving forward. And then I think we need support. Like when I think about my choir here, it's about maybe 20 people. And the fact that we haven't seen each other since the first part of March, and we won't be able to sing together like you said, Dr. Garrett, for maybe a year, I mean, I have to support them. So I try to have a conference call with them or Zoom just to connect with them, because some of us are really struggling. Then this whole thing with the voice lessons, I've done my voice lessons online. I know Dr. Scott is doing hers online, but I have a student that has a recital next semester. What am I going to do? Will it be just her on the stage and the accompanist? I mean, what are the HBCU choirs going to do? So all of this, we have to continue to talk about, to support one another, and to just build up our community. So we do have a few questions. So someone says, how many vocalists should sing during a service? I'll give that to anyone.
I mean, you're gonna need some harmony, so at least 2.
At least 2.
Yes, but I mean, a lot of churches are using soloists as well.
Right.
When they get the message across, so one soloist would be fine. Like I said earlier, at my church Reed Temple, we're doing soprano, alto, and tenor, and a soloist.
Okay. Anyone else have an idea? So I know where I am. It's there are 4 musicians, a drummer, a keyboard pianist, and then the direct one choir, so I sing, and then the praise and worship team leader. And so we go in, she sings, we record her singing praise and worship songs. They record me singing, anthems and spirituals, and we're out. That's how we're handling it right now. So it's not even a group. It's just, and even with us, we stay our distance from one another, when we're shifting. So yes. Yes, Johnson. Yes.
I think that's going to be different. That's one thing if you're meeting online or you're doing virtual worship, but the churches, like some of the churches around here, are starting to meet again in person. So then you have to answer the question or ask the question, especially in the African-American church, how do you get singers on stage singing, even if it's 2 or 3, without the congregation joining in? Because then it really is a health risk if the entire congregation then joins in song on a hymn.
Right.
Spreading the virus. If there's one person that has it, it's all over the church at that point.
Well, I read an article today in the Post that said that people were asked to hum with the hymn.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Johnson Thompson, what about hum?
Let's see, humming, I'm trying to hum to see. I mean, sounds like it might be okay. But I think you have to open your mouth at some time.
You do?
Mm-hmm. But it's a better.
So we're at a very, very precarious stage. I was talking to someone. Well, I also do a lot of environmental justice work here in North Carolina. In fact, I'm on the Secretary of Environmental Qualities advisory, vice chair of the advisory committee. And so we had our board meeting yesterday, online Zoom. And, the environmental justice communities, I mean, people, in the eastern part of North Carolina that suffered during the hurricanes, I mean, they were unable to do a lot of things for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. If you think about the people in New Orleans in Katrina, where the schools were shut down, some people got to go to other universities, but the majority didn't. I think one thing we could do is maybe, and not just for choir directors, but kind of, get with those communities and say, how did you survive during that time educationally and some of the other ways? But, and also I'll just tell you, we have been so comfortable. And I think, even with us as Black people, as we've experienced so much discrimination and poverty, in a way, we've really been sheltered. If you think about those countries that are undergoing war and famine for year after year after year. So I'm just saying, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we'll just have to figure out how we will be able to get through this. This is not the first pandemic.
Mhm.
You know, there was a pandemic and, you know, the flu pandemic in 18. The other pandemics that we have had, such as the Hong Kong flu, Ebola didn't stay, you know, we really weren't impacted by Ebola, but look at the countries that were.
Mhm.
So we'll just have to talk more and see how we can get through this.
Yes. I have another question. This says, are musicians being paid more due to circumstances? Patrick, Dr. Garrett, maybe you all could answer that one. I guess they're talking about hazard pay.
Yeah. What you think, Patrick?
I was just you know, I think it varies from church to church. You know, we've been blessed that none of our musicians have had to get a decrease in pay so far. And actually, I've talked to a few of my colleagues across the country. Tithes and offerings have really gone up in certain churches.
Yes.
Pandemic, which is a great thing. So our musicians have been, you know, spared from that standpoint. I don't know. I obviously our musicians are not playing as usual, but if there's some way for the church to continue keeping them on payroll, that would be great.
Yeah.
Somebody, okay. Let's see. Dr. Tony Arnold McFarland says, Dr. McFarland wants to chime in. Go ahead. You may not be able to. She said, based on the new physical constraints, it cannot exceed the number of seats with social distancing. And she was referring to the question about choir members, how many should you have? So there are some constraints there. And I guess that still goes back to that 15 to 20 feet that we should be considering. All right. Any other questions? Do we have any questions from the chat room? I'm looking. Any other questions or concerns that you all want to voice at this time? We're getting close to wrapping up.
You know, one thing I wanted to share,
Sure,
and to touch and take it a step further, based off of one of the comments that Dr. Johnson Thompson shared. Many do not know, I actually came from New Orleans, but at the time when Hurricane Katrina happened. And so I had just graduated from Tulane University with my master's degree when Katrina hit. And that's actually how I made my way to North Carolina. And I'll tell anybody, I really didn't know much about North Carolina. Outside of Raleigh was the capital. You know, I'm a Pittsburgh girl. But I said that to say, the main thing that I sit back and I think about is you hearing the keywords of resiliency. And when I sit back and think of those and my loved ones from New Orleans, and I consider my church family back home like their loved ones, right? And my colleagues at Tulane and Xavier as though they are extended cousins. And I sit back and I see the ones that really thrived in a situation. And the ones that really, truly, authentically thrived, I remember we kept in touch a lot. We had increased support mechanisms. We were constantly calling each other to see, are you okay? What are you doing? Just to hear how your day is going. To one person that might not seem like much, but to someone else who does not feel as though they have someone that cares enough just to pick up the phone or call to say, hey, are you okay? What did you do today? That can mean so much to someone. And I'll never forget the sermon before Katrina hit. Our pastor, she preached on holding God's unchanging hand. And that's one of the things, you know, I still keep in touch with that small, you know, church, you know, from New Orleans. And everyone says, yeah, that's amazing. That was the last sermon of holding the God's unchanging hand. And those same theories apply now. Holding on to God's on changing hand while we have so much information coming at us from so many different ways, you know, and being mindful of how you're getting that information, because not all information that you're hearing is accurate and correct. If you have any questions, if you feel as though you may be having any signs or symptoms, reach out and contact a licensed medical provider. Reach out to your doctor's office. You can call to urgent care. They're starting to do a lot with telehealth. And so they're having different teleconferences. But again, going back to that social determinant of health, we're starting to see that digital divide between the communities, and communities that are set up and already know how to interact with some of the different telehealth technologies, and those that are not able to set up and move with those technologies. So maybe some of the things that you could do with the choir members is talk to the choir members, perhaps through Zoom calls, perhaps, and Dr. McFarland, if you could jump in and chime in, NSBE, they're actually offering some technical assistance to help members of the community that may need some help and assistance in regard to how are you up in regard to the telehealth, knowing how to use your phone, knowing how to log to your electronic health record so that you can have those conversations. If there's someone that needs a medical provider, I know we're in very different times, but if there were, if some of those things came up, I could, you know, if someone were to reach out to me, you know, offline, we could perhaps have some conversations to see what that would look like, given the current circumstance, to get them engaged in the healthcare system. But, you know, those are some of the different ways that we can kind of think outside of the box to support each other and to be each other's brother's keeper during these uncertain times.
I appreciate that. I especially appreciate you saying that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I think we are getting caught up in misinformation, which is why this platform is so very important. So absolutely, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We have another question. Are virtual choirs and recitals the new future?
For a while.
I think for the near future, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the new normal. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And
I wanted to ask.
Yes, please.
I wanted to ask a question. I know that the purpose of tonight's call is to deal with singers, choirs in particular, but I can't help but think about how this must also be impacting people who play instruments.
Yes.
Woodwind and brass players in particular, because of how the air moves through the instrument and because of how they rehearse in the same settings and the like. And I'm just wondering, obviously it's sort of outside the range of this call, but I'm certainly, there are so many things that sometimes choirs do with orchestra or choirs do with instrumental accompaniment. I'm certainly wondering the impact on that side of music making as well.
Okay. We just did a virtual choir number that had an instrumental prelude. And so the instrumentalists did their part at their individual homes. And then the video editor, you know, put the frames together. And it really came out beautiful. But that's what they have to do now. Orchestras, they can't be close either.
No.
Right. Yeah.
They can't be close either.
yeah,
And we've seen a lot of that. We've seen a lot of that online. And I mean, I'm not a, you know, I can't critique that well, but it sounds good to me.
It's the next best thing for right now.
Dr. Lundy, you were about to say something?
Yeah, we just had a meeting prior to this Zoom call about our orchestra and how we're going to reemerge into the sanctuary. And we were told point blank that the orchestra would have to go on hold. So,
wow.
Yeah, orchestra and dance ministry, for that matter of fact.
Right.
Yes, Dr. Tony McFarland just said that, you know, this is affecting all areas of worship. Right. You know, the dancers are breathing. I mean, it's all relevant. And I know we talked about virtual choirs and some people like, oh yeah, let's do that. That's very involved. It is very involved. It's not like, you know, you can do it in an hour. So I heard a gentleman say yesterday that it took him 48 hours to do one. By the time he got all of the people to record, he got it. They had the recording sent to him, and by the time he put it all together, it took him about 48 hours. Now that may not be the norm, but to even think that it takes you that long, like you said, it's a lot involved. So I know everybody doesn't want to go there, but at the same time, it may be what we end up doing at this particular point.
And let me tell you, even though I am no stranger to audio editing, but if you haven't done it in a while and you don't do it every day, it takes quite a while. As we talked yesterday or Sunday, it's either a lot of hard work or very expensive work.
Yeah.
A pro to do it. And
yes.
It's done in no time if you get a pro to do it who's done it all their lives. But if you're doing it on your own and that's not something you do every day, it is very difficult work.
Right. I saw a gentleman on, and I was in an online workshop with him. I believe his name is Roy Cotton. Some of you may know him. I think he's the minister of music at
he's in Texas.
Texas, yes. And he is providing that service.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fee associated with it, but he is doing it for people who want that kind of service, want to move into virtual choirs. So you do have that option. So
I don't want to sound, I'm sorry.
No.
All doom and gloom, but those universities that have either music technology or music media programs will certainly have some students. I know we have some students here that are capable of doing that.
Sure.
My thing is, I don't want to ask them to do that kind of work free because they are using their professional services. But that's another option. And we have plenty of universities, especially HBCUs, that offer those programs and have students with the software and the ability to do that in no time at all.
Yeah.
Professor Johnson.
Yes.
On that note of virtual choirs, I know people are looking at that as a possible solution. The skill level of the choir member will have to be a higher expectation in order for that to be a possibility. And and the choir member will have to be well versed in some audio technology as well. So it would require some retraining of the choir members and some extra time for them to be able to do that effectively.
Absolutely.
So just people got to think about that. The skill level. I know a lot of choirs are very big sometimes, but we'll have to do more with less.
Yeah. We have a lot to think about. I'll tell you today, I received a email from the provost of the college saying that the North Carolina Agriculture and Technical State University would resume classes in the fall. And I was like, wow, like, I don't even know what to think or how to feel about this. There will be the option, of course, of online teaching. We did get we had to complete a survey later on this afternoon asking, do we want to teach totally online? Do we want face-to-face? Do we have a preference? I tell you, it shook me for a minute, Dr. Scott. I was like, wow, I hadn't quite gotten there yet. I was concerned about the church choir. So I hadn't really started thinking so much about school outside of voice. I think we've already decided voice will be online, but I hadn't thought about the other parts of that. So we definitely are in a different day, a different time. And although the future of the choir and singers may seem dim right now, it is not over. It is not over. And I'm still hopeful, and I'm still praying that it be eradicated. We come up with something will happen sooner than later so that we can move forward. So as we begin to wrap this up, I don't see any more questions. I'm just going to go around the room and ask you all to give me your parting thoughts or concerns or whatever you'd like to say at this point. Let's start with Dr. Zachary.
I will say that, especially this being a room full of African Americans, a room full of HBCU educated people and directors, we have overcome worse.
Yeah.
We'll emerge strong. We will. This is only temporary. It's uncomfortable. It's inconvenient. But as I told my choir, if one person dies from COVID-19 and we can prevent that by staying at home, by our distance, it's all worth it. So it's all temporary. It'll be over before we know it.
Thank you for sharing. Dr. Lundy?
I really wanted to share a Facebook post, part of one that our friend Tony McNeil wrote recently.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It says, we cannot sing the same way we used to. If we sing at all, if truth be told, some of us are more concerned with finding the perfect comeback song to conjure a social media worthy praise break, or about the need to dismantle previous notions of worship leading that may put our congregation singers and musicians at risk. And so when I read that, I just immediately thought, again, being that most of us are faith-based here, and we still believe that God is able to hear our prayers. It's very important that we not necessarily look back at how we did things, but to pray and ask God to give us new and innovative ideas to work with our singers, our total worship arts of the church. And there are just ways to do it. There are ways to do it. I even got a call recently from Todd Gilbert. He's a worship leader out of Carolina. He was offering his services. I think that's a great thing that we need to do, is to collaborate more and really work together through this pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Dr. Scott?
I think, first of all, thank you so much for hosting this. Thank you so much for pulling us all together to hear, to learn, and to also share. This has been incredibly encouraging to me, and I'm just grateful. So thank you for that. I'm taking sort of a different spin here, and I'm thinking about how digital platforms have to suddenly become our friends. And platforms like Zoom and all of the other platforms on which we are using to teach. And I believe that those platforms are going to have to rapidly come up to another level, because when you try to teach singers on a platform like Zoom, you get to about D4 and above, and you're unable to really hear the harmonics. You're unable to hear them clearly. And there is certainly a way for these platforms to mitigate that and come to a different level. I can't imagine the frustration of teachers who teach only classically and are using a platform like Zoom, where there are literally certain pitches you can't even hear your students make. And there just needs to be sort of a recalibration around these platforms that we all have to use. And I think, you know, if we start asking for that, you know, in a very sort of, you know, without refusing to stop, we might see that. Because a platform like Zoom is so easy to use and so many churches are using it, I think even small advancements like that will help kind of close the gap that, I don't see your name, but it says RTP Nesby president.
That's Tony.
In terms of the gaps that, you know, choir singers, the platforms have to change as well. So that's kind of another conversation, but it just occurred to me.
That's good. That's very good. And I tell you, I have been looking for the perfect app to teach voice lessons, and I've not found it. And you're right. There are times my classical singers are singing high notes, and it's like, you're too close to the mic. And no, that's not it. It's just technology is just not there. Dr. Garrett, would you please share with us your thoughts?
Okay, well, first, thanks, Valerie. This has been wonderful and insightful. If anybody needs detailed instructions, we worked out a list of detailed instructions for making our virtual choirs, and I'd be happy to share it.
Wonderful.
It goes, you know, it's as simple as click this, and you'll see an icon that says this. Then click this. I mean, so I'm happy to share. I've shared with 2 or 3 ministers of music already. And then the last thing I wanted to say was, at the end of the article that the president of the American Choral Directors Association wrote, he said that when we get together again as choirs, no one will be able to really read the sheet music because there'll be so many tears in our eyes.
Yeah.
I thought great quote.
That's awesome. Yes, 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 yes.
Together again.
Yes, absolutely. And we are going to continue this conversation next week, by the way. I have a few special guests that are really going to help with this conversation. So stay tuned for that. Kirsten, we're going to hear from you. And then Dr. Johnson Thompson, we'll hear from you. And then we'll have one announcement and we'll be done.
Awesome. Thank you again so much, Dr. Johnson, for providing this platform and to bring together the science and public health along with the artists and the teachers that are making the beautiful music. So thank you for that and for creating this bridge. The biggest thing that I would like to share is just, you know, when it's all said and done, make sure that you're doing all that you can do to keep your personal body as best that it can be. Making sure that you're eating a balanced diet, that you're getting in your exercise, that you're wearing your PPE when you're out and about, and also when others are in close proximity to you. I sit back and think of the grocery stores. And even though they have the pieces of tape on the ground, you're still not 6 feet away from the person. Or how many times you're looking to see, you're reading the nutrition label and somebody will walk in front of you, right? And so just being mindful of those things for yourself when you're out doing your shopping, thinking of ways outside of the box, also taking care of your loved ones, those that do not reside with you. If you are able to go to the grocery store and you have an older family member or community member that's not able to get out as readily, call them on the phone, ask them if they need something picked up, and you can put it on the steps for them, or you could put it outside their door for them. But this really is the time to have that strength and to hold the community up.
Thank you so much. All right, Dr. Johnson Thompson, who has really given us a lot to think about as well tonight. Please share your final thoughts with us.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to commend you, Professor Johnson, for pulling this together. It is so important that we continue to educate ourselves. And I want to say that we have to do even more with going out into the communities, because there's so much bad information that's being circulated. And I know we have health disparities as a factor that makes us more at risk, but we also have this nonsense information that's going around that is on top of that. So let's think about other ways that we can get out into the community and educate our people. And I am just so inspired, and I feel so, I appreciate learning all about this, what you guys are doing, because as you know, this is not my areas, but now I feel like I know something. Thank you so much for including me.
Thank you. Again, thank you all panelists. You have been fantastic. I've learned a great deal. I hope others have really gleaned from this conversation. Just before we part, again, we will try this again next Tuesday. We'll have some more guests that will appear and help us to continue the conversation. And just before we end, Dr. Tony Arnold McFarland and Ms. Alana Krotzer will come and make a couple announcements.
Thank you, Professor Johnson. I do apologize for not having my name there. I just learned that I cannot be in 2 Zoom meetings at the same time. So when I moved from my NSBE meeting, I guess I could not change my name. So actually, I just wanted to stop by and just kind of share that my colleague, Alana Krotzer, and I will be doing some consulting. We've already kind of started that. Kirsten is also a member of NSBE. Alana is also a member of NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers. And we will be offering a service to help churches walk through the guidelines and implement. So what we bring to the table is our background in process improvement, quality, compliance, risk management. And then in engineering, there is a tool called Process Failure Modes, Effects, and Analysis, which allows you to see basically train wrecks before they happen. So we are making ourselves available to that. It is a consultant service. And I will also allude to what Kirsten mentioned earlier, NSBE, which is a nonprofit. I'm the president of the Research Triangle Professionals chapter in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. We do have some virtual volunteerism that people can sign up for on our website, which is rtpnsbe.org. So if you know of a smaller church that just needs help getting set up with online giving, a website, we've had churches that, this was the first time they had to do anything like this. Just making a conference call was a big deal for some churches to continue worship. So we do have services for that available. And I also want to mention alluding to what Dr. Scott said about, and also Professor Johnson, about the tools not being as capable. You are correct. They are not as user-friendly because they were not designed for that. Those are some of the fail modes of the tools. However, we're going to also have to retool ourselves. NSBE is going to offer some music production classes. However, it's only going to be for our children. So it's introductory. But there are some online classes through Coursera and other virtual platforms that do education that will give us some more skill sets in music production. So in that virtual world, as a musician, a singer, there are other tools that we could be using, but they will cost a little bit more money, and your equipment to use them may have to be an upgrade as well. So everybody's going to have to retool and be willing to invest a little bit. Alana, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we talked a lot about, covering your mouth during respiratory, wearing a mask, but we didn't talk about when you sneeze or when you cough, the surfaces that are being contaminated by that sneeze and that cough, and how you clean and disinfect afterwards. So those are the types of things that we could help a lot of the congregations with. What would be your cleaning protocol? How often do you have to clean? How do you clean? As well as, your social distancing measures and hand washing, etc.
And one more thing I was just going to add to, someone had asked about, well, how many people do you need? This kind of leaned into our engineering side a little bit. The first thing that every church is going to have to do is reassess their capacity. Your sanctuary may have been designed for a certain number of people, but with the social distancing calculation in there, that has to be reassessed for your whole building. And then from there, the ministries that operate and the amount of space that they need, that all has to be reassessed. So that's the first thing. Your capacity is not what the building was built for anymore.
Exactly.
It has to take into consideration the risk and the severity of those risks and the likelihood of those risks. So more to come on that, and we will be available hopefully in the future, and I'll work with Professor Johnson on what that needs to look like and how we can help out. Thank you.
And Dr. McFarland, if you'll type in that link that you just stated, and Dr. Garrett, if you'll give me the link to for anyone that wants to contact you about those steps.
J. Garrett at alfredstreet.org.
One more time.
J is January, Joyce. J. Garrett, Garrett, at Alfred, ALFREDSTREET.org. And I'll be happy to send you what we have, what we use.
Okay.
And I don't know if Alana had the information for our contact. Did you have that on the slide, or do you want me?
I have it on the slide. Do you want me to share it, or do you just want me to email?
Yeah, because if you will type it in the comments, you can share it out loud because the Facebook viewers will need to have it. So if you will do that.
All right, so Tony's contact information, the phone number is 919-576-0051. Email is AARnoldMCF@gmail.com.
Okay.
And my email is Alana, ALANA, .KROTZER@gmail.com.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you very much for all of that. For my Facebook viewers, there is a form in the comment section where you can submit questions. Next week, we already know there are questions that we've not addressed here tonight. So if you want to go ahead and submit those questions for next week, please do so. Please invite your pastors, because I know a lot of them, again, have not thought about this. Some music leaders are in position to make their decisions for their music departments. And then there are some that don't have that luxury where they have to connect with the pastor or the leaders of the church to make these kind of decisions. So the importance of this conversation is, A, you need to be able to translate what's being said here for them, but it will be better if they can just be here. Thank you again and good night.
Night.
Thank you.